There are some terms in politics we hear all the time and we just kind of accept them. Rogue state is a big one, but have you ever stopped to think about what it really means? What if it's not just a description? What if it's actually a tool?
Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
This episode examines how the label rogue state functions within international power systems and why that classification shapes global outcomes. So for this explainer, we're diving into the work of Noam Chomsky, Edward W. Said, and Ramsey Clark in their book, Acts of Aggression. And I want to be really clear up front, our goal here isn't to justify or condemn any single country's actions. Instead, we're trying to understand the system itself, the structural logic behind who gets policed on the world stage and why. To really unpack that logic, we've got to start with the term itself. What does rogue state actually mean, according to this analysis?
Well, the book argues that a rogue state isn't necessarily defined by its crimes, but by its disobedience. It's a state that simply refuses to follow the rules set by the world's most powerful nations. And this is the crucial point, right? The label has less to do with morality and more to do with who's challenging the global pecking order.
So you see, the term is way more than just a political insult. It's a functional part of a much bigger system. It works like a filter, sorting nations into two groups, those who comply and those who need to be disciplined. To really get our heads around this, let's use an analogy. To really grasp how this system works, let's think of it with one single powerful metaphor.
First, just picture the entire global political system
as a massive security checkpoint. And at this checkpoint, the world's most powerful countries are the gatekeepers. They get to decide who gets a full pat-down and who sails right on through. So certain countries, they get pulled aside. Their every move is scrutinized, condemned in the press, and then bam, they're hit with severe penalties like sanctions or even military force. Meanwhile, other nations, and hey, often it's the gatekeepers themselves or their allies, are doing similar, sometimes even worse things, but they get waved right through. And that is the key to the whole metaphor. It's the structure of the checkpoint itself, and who's running it that really determines who gets labeled a threat. Okay, so that's the metaphor. Now let's see how this plays out in the real world with some examples from the book. You start to see this pattern of selective enforcement very, very quickly. The question is, who gets stopped at this checkpoint and who gets a free pass? Well, consider this comparison. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, the response was overwhelming force and crippling sanctions. But when Indonesia invaded East Timor, leading to what many have described as near-genocidal violence, its punishment was getting more weapons and support from the United States. It's a pretty jarring contrast. And look, this isn't some kind of speculation. The folks involved were surprisingly open about it. In his own memoirs, U.S. Ambassador Daniel Patrick Moynihan basically admitted that his job was to make sure the UN was utterly ineffective in stopping Indonesia. Why? Because it served the interests of one of the global gatekeepers. And the pattern just keeps going. Cuba's involvement in Angola got it branded with the international terrorism tag. At the very same time, apartheid South Africa was causing an estimated 1.5 million deaths in neighboring countries with US and UK support, and yet it was never formally designated a rogue state. So, if this double standard is so obvious, you've got to ask, why does this system stick around? The book points to a few key pillars that keep the whole thing standing. First, there's just raw power asymmetry. The most powerful states can simply ignore international law when it suits them. Then you've got domestic incentives. It's a classic political move. Create a foreign devil to make yourself look strong and distract everyone from problems at home. There's also a need for a compelling narrative. After the Cold War, a new enemy was needed to justify military spending. And finally, the system is held up by institutional fragmentation, where international bodies like the UN are just deliberately bypassed or weakened when they get in the way. And this all brings us right back to the central theme of this channel, a crisis in perception. You see, the real crisis is that we're encouraged to view each intervention or sanction as a standalone event. We focus on this leader or that country, but we miss the bigger picture. We miss the security checkpoint system itself that singles them out. We're so focused on the person being searched that we don't even see the architecture of the security line. So this leaves us with the fundamental question the analysis poses. If the most powerful nations get to write the rules, act as both judge and jury, and then excuse themselves from that same judgment, who is truly the rogue? This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.